It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. As I said, Tony has done a great job of introducing me, so I won't bore you with the details. But yes, as Tony said, born in Zimbabwe, but grew up in Zambia. My dad was a wildlife biologist, and that was my childhood, going to the bush when I could. But I'll skip through those bits as Tony has so introduced me. But in a nutshell, I've been coming to the Kafui since a very young boy, and I've worked in the park since about 2004. And in that time, been a safari guide, a guide trainer, an environmental consultant, and a lodge manager. And in 2012, my good friend Tyrone and I established Jeffrey and McKeith Safaris. We shared a deep passion for conservation, and that's what we agreed there and then would underpin everything that we were about to embark on. We recognized the need for conservation and believed that the surest way of achieving this would be through a sustainable tourism enterprise and a sound business model. And I suppose in some sense, we needed to find a company for our cause, and Musekese Conservation was ultimately to become that very cause, and really was a direct result of tourism and tourism alone. So here we've got a couple of examples of what goes on in the Kafui. Here's our main area of the camp. This was, I'm not sure if this was pre-Tyrone's talk last year, but this was a young leopard born in the camp, and it became so familiar and habituated that at nighttime we would catch it on camera trap, stealing game drive blankets and eating the cushions and causing all sorts of drama. Down here we've got camp on the edge of the lagoon. One of the features of the Musekese area is these fantastic seasonal lagoons which keep water in all year round. And then of course, lions are a regular visitor in camp. So in the first instance, sorry, where's that? There we go. In the first instance, our presence alone, from establishing a tourism operation and the limited amount of infrastructure that we had put in, was pretty effective, and we saw an increase in wildlife populations almost overnight. You know, just by being there, our presence had pushed illegal activities outwards. And we saw our resident lion population go from just a small handful of known individuals to approximately 28 lions across 2 prides, and with a recruitment rate of close to 100%. Elephants started repopulating the core areas as we became successful at keeping fires out. Small and medium-sized antelopes started to flourish, and there was plenty of signs that larger game was coming back. What was important, though, is that we were starting to bring back people, and we began creating circuits in the park with other operators and encouraging people to stay longer. We really tried to tailor our safaris around the conservation story about coming to an area that previously had little or no presence, and where poachers essentially had free rein. Dry season fires ravaged the landscape. And as daunting as it was, we weren't put off by this and believed in our vision. And we were extremely fortunate that most of our guests believed in it too. And so simply by coming out to stay with us, they were really playing a part in this mission. And slowly but surely, our occupancies increased, and we were able to put more and more back into the park. And we often joked between ourselves that if anyone were to invest in us, it's probably a nightmare, because any profits we did make, we were spending on conservation overnight. So, but anyway, that's what we really set out to do. And I was extremely fortunate in having Tyrone as a business partner, and that we shared the same vision. And eventually we were able to introduce a small conservation fee to every bed night. And that really helped to provide, you know, significantly more resources to patrol teams for fuel, for rations, for anti-poaching and so on. So these images here, this is your typical dry season along the lagoons in the Musekese Lumbea area. And I'll show you where it is in just a moment. But not uncommon to now see herds of, 50, 60, 70 elephant, hundreds of antelope, zebra, puku, all the large antelope starting to come back. And one of the features of Musekese has been the resident lion prides, and they spend a lot of time close to or around camp. As you can see, these were 4 male cubs actually, right over here, coming past the dinner table that had recently been set. But presence alone for a while was, it worked, and we enjoyed the success of that, but it was short-lived. Yeah, some of these images might be a bit hard to see for some, but I'll leave them up there for a moment. And as I said, the initial successes that we had were short-lived, and at the time, the prevailing socioeconomic circumstances pretty soon led to a sharp increase in poaching, both for bushmeat and ivory. And with all that poaching, obviously came, out of control wildfires that were destroying, huge tracts of land. Snaring became prolific, obviously targeting antelope and so on, but it does have an unfortunate bycatch of anything that might walk past. Large antelope and other ungulates were regularly seen with snares and in the core area. So we realized that something really had to be done. And so whilst we'd always envisioned establishing a proper conservation project, we didn't realize that we'd have to do it so soon. And what was originally a longer term plan became urgent. It was, and we focused all of our attentions on getting this off the ground. So how did we lean on our sort of relatively young at the time safari operation to establish a full-blown project that could really make a difference? There were already well-established organizations operating in and around the Kafue, and bigger partners waiting as well. So, but the simple fact of the matter is there's simply not enough resources to cover the park in its entirety, and wildlife was being lost at an alarming rate, and that's no secret. So you can see here some of the confiscations our teams were making in the first instance. This was a lioness Tyrone and I came across we actually walked the top section of the Kafue National Park from north to south over a few days. And if you look closely here, you can see where this unfortunate lioness lost its foot in a snare. This was a leopard that we found with a snare, and together with the Zambian carnival program, we were able to keep track of it and eventually de-snare it. And we continue to see that leopard in good health on a regular basis. So this foot here is one of our male lions, in the area, and he lost the 4 toes on his rear right foot, but continues to persist today. So he's doing very well. But as you can see from these images, that there was a real problem that needed to be addressed. And our first challenge was to convince the department that we were well placed to help. And this involved endless phone calls, emails, letters, meetings. It was a really long process of turning an idea into a concept into a plan into a proposal, and then obviously to turn that into action. And not frustrating, but really every step of the way, we had to justify our position and defend why we would want to do something like this. Because at the end of the day, myself and Tyrone, we were just a safari camp. We were just, but we weren't even a safari camp of any great proportions, or, we were not an international company or force to be reckoned with, if you like, but we stuck at it. And yeah, we always try and remember that, because, whilst we do now have the fortunate backing of some key donors, we still remain just a safari camp at the end of the day. So after, years of fostering relationships with the authorities and helping where we could, we slowly but surely got the sign-offs that we needed, memorandums of understanding, agreements in place, and just just even letters giving us the authority to go ahead and do things. And slowly but surely we got that. And, we fundraised with guests who were interested in the story. We did events in Lusaka. We sold photographs. We walked across the park. We did whatever we could to raise what money we could to go towards the conservation initiatives. This picture here down on the left with the Zambian flag, I was, I think last year or 2 years previous, we walked the northern Kafue from the southeast corner to the northwest corner, basically from Nalusanga entrance gate all the way to the Busanga plains. It was about 160 kilometers, and that photo was taken on one of the highest peak of the Kafue, somewhere I'd always wanted to get to, and totally inaccessible, but the views were worth it. So we were basically prepared to do anything it took to raise money for conservation. It was a tough process throughout the season, in between guiding and hosting and managing, because remember, Tyrone and myself are at camp permanently, and so we were hard at work in between lunches and dinners, writing proposals, planning budgets and strategies that would enable us to protect the landscape with the limited resources that we had. And eventually a successful proposal with what is the Lion Recovery Fund gave us the breakthrough that we needed. And their continued support has really been instrumental. But what I will say is that without tourism, which was an element that demonstrated our sustainability, such proposals, I think, would have mostly been unsuccessful. So the tourism aspect and the sustainability of it was a real key in getting off the ground. And as I say, this gave us the resources required to complete the anti-poaching base that we had started building, which is about 25 kilometers away from camp, and in an area that was particularly hard hit by illegal activities. Really hard to get to, inaccessible actually, and mostly thick bush, which is ideal for poachers to hide away, and as we were to eventually find, littered with drying racks and carcasses. So some of you may have already seen this short video on our website and social media, but I'm just going to play it now for those who haven't, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of an insight into the project before I go on into a bit more detail.
The threat of increasing trends in bushmeat poaching and habitat destruction from uncontrolled fires across the eastern Kafue ecosystem was unprecedented. Recognizing the urgency to address these threats, Musekese Conservation was established in 2018. Understanding the scale of the area and the limitations on the ground of basic logistics for the patrol teams, one of the primary objectives of Musekese Conservation is to provide logistical support. A couple of years down the line, and with the help of a few key donors and generous individuals, we are seeing incredible results. We have managed to recruit and train 3 full-time anti-poaching teams that operate out of our recently completed anti-poaching base, and together with the Department of National Parks and Wildlife have taken on the responsibility of protecting a core area of the eastern Kafue ecosystem, some 2,500 square kilometers. The task of protecting such a large area is challenging, but our hopes are to introduce aerial support to make this enormous area manageable, and as time goes by we will add more ground teams and support them through improving infrastructure. In addition to all of this, we are monitoring our impact on the area by introducing an ecological research component to Musekese Conservation to ensure that we are fulfilling our objectives and making evidence-based decisions. This includes camera trapping, fire management, and monitoring of large carnivores. In the long run, this will add to a greater understanding of the Kafue, but hopefully also show the world what is possible with the right motivation and intentions. Every day is an opportunity to learn and adapt, The task at hand is enormous, but with continued support, we can and will achieve these small but critical milestones.
Okay, so I hope that gave you a good insight into what goes on the ground. So where is the Musekese Lumbea area? Some of you today will be really familiar with it, having stayed with us a number of times. But as you can see on this slide here, it's the only section of the Kafue that lies east of the Kafue River. So you've got the enormous Kafue National Park here, the Kafue River that winds its way through the copper belt into the park and down alongside it. And this section here is the Musekese Lumbea Intensive Protection Zone. And if you look at this map here, it's sandwiched between, so the red is the Musekese area. It's sandwiched between a couple of GMAs, and then this purple area here is open area, which has a lot of encroachment and farms, and then there's a conservancy here, the Mushingashi or Kashikoto Conservancy. So it's an extremely large area, and let me just, this next slide is possibly one of my favorite slides that we have, because it really does give a good indication of how big the area is. So this red dotted line is the Musekese Lumbea area, and we overlaid the Maasai Mara National Reserve on top of it. So that 2,700 square kilometers, which is about 12% of the park, is a little over twice the size of the Maasai Mara. So it's, I'll leave that slide up for a moment, so hopefully it sort of sinks in as to how big the area is and some of the challenges that might pose. But some of its most stunning features include large lagoons with permanent water, wooded grasslands, pristine riverine habitat. But by and large, the majority of the area is Miombo woodland. But one of the main reasons why we were drawn to this area in the first instance is the way the river runs sort of alongside it. So if you follow my mouse here at this top corner here, this is where the Kafue River enters the park. Oh, there's my mouse gone. There it is. This is where the Kafue River enters the park, runs all the way along. This dotted boundary here is all river, all the way down, right through down to Hook Bridge, which is in central Kafue. And so this is all boundary here as well, but not river. But this particular section creates a very useful boundary that we could work against, and in some cases forms almost three sides of a square. You can see in particular this feature here. So from a protection point of view, it kind of made perfect sense. But it was also remote, it was untouched, and somewhere we felt that we could have a really positive impact. And our original dream, Tyrone will tell you, I'm sure, is that was to secure a core area big enough and safe enough to eventually reintroduce black rhino, which sadly were locally extinct since the late 80s. So keep an eye on that, and that still forms a big part of what we would like to achieve in the future. But since opening up this area and providing a degree of resource protection and infrastructure, we've encouraged the development of a number of other tourism sites and hope that in time more quality operations can be established in the park. But as I said, I really wanted to show you that slide in particular because it always hits home to me as to how big the area is. And so from a tourism perspective, it's an incredibly valuable area with enormous potential, but its importance goes way beyond that. This area is a significant wildlife corridor for animals that might move between central Kafue National Park and the northeast, and not only for large ungulates, but also for other keystone or flagship species, such as, your wild dog, cheetah, lion. So it's a major source of wildlife for the surrounding areas. And if it's well protected, it really does have the potential to support alternative livelihoods in the game management areas or the open areas. Things like community conservancies, game ranching, so on and so forth. So, as I've put here, we do have evidence that wildlife is moving through and between these areas. So it's significant, and without it, it really does threaten the integrity of that whole eastern section of wildlife habitat. So what are we doing to ensure its protection? Well, first and foremost, we've been slowly building up the anti-poaching base, which by the end of next month will house 28 community scouts and wildlife police officers. They make up 4 patrol teams. We have radio operators, drivers, commanders. In camp, of course, they're looked after by our permanent staff that all come from the local communities. And during COVID, we've also been able to integrate some of our permanent lodge staff into the daily running of the anti-poaching base, and that extends to our chefs as well. So the anti-poaching staff have certainly been well fed. This gentleman here, this figure here, many of you will recognize from camp as Kapaipi, keeps us really well fed. A lot of resources are required to effectively cover the landscape with such limited infrastructure. So we have a number of patrol vehicles. We use the river. As you've seen, the river is a huge feature in this area. And so a couple of boats to move patrol teams from area to area, especially in the wet season. We're just about to introduce a light aircraft, which will enter operations in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And the purpose of this will be to basically provide routine surveillance and act as a deterrent to help sort of pinpoint any illegal activities, but also to work with, organizations such as Zambian Carnival Program and Panthera and so on, where we can assist when we can with the aerial monitoring of radio, any radio collared individuals. For anyone listening and who's interested in aircraft, this is a Sky Jeep, which is a 2-seater side-by-side and perfect for application in the bush. So the anti-poaching base has now become essentially the nerve center of our operations, and we took the step of setting up an advanced digital control room, and this manages and monitors all of our operations. And recently we partnered with Earth Ranger as part of the Vulcan Foundation, and this really powerful tool enables us to monitor the patrols, the vehicles, the boats, aircraft in real time, and any wildlife that with satellite enabled collars we can also track and monitor in real time using this hardware and software. And across a landscape as vast as the Kafue is, the use of this technology really does help you get ahead of illegal activities, and you can then focus what little resources you have where it really matters. But apart from anything else, it really does ensure the safety of patrol teams, and being able to communicate with them in an instant and know where they are does really provide the backup that they need. But beyond anti-poaching, we really are interested in the research side of things, not only on the basis that it's important to measure the effectiveness of our interventions, but it really is a genuine interest of ours to know what exists and persists in this vast area. Remembering that before we came into the area, it was totally unknown. Tyrone spoke last time about it was really going into a wilderness where there was no roads, no access, no presence of anything or anybody, and so we don't have any baseline data or information to work from, except for the anecdotal evidence we started gathering when we first started exploring the area. So the research component is a big part of what we do. And Tyrone and I, we used to spend all of our pocket money on camera traps that we were able to sort of dot around the place, and we got some incredible results. But we also recently introduced the research component properly into operations, and through extensive applications and processes, we finally got a research permit, which allows us to conduct research in the park. we welcomed a PhD student into the team, and together with Ruth, who's this lady over here, all masked up, which is good to see. She's an amazing Zambian conservation graduate, and she recently joined us. And so our research team are basically setting out to undertake an extensive baseline population study across the whole area, using a combination of transects and camera trapping surveys, and working with camps and lodges through photographs and IDs, basically to try and build a picture of what is there. This will really help us to understand the state of the wildlife, but in the longer term, and if we keep the efforts up, it will help us to determine whether our efforts are indeed having a positive impact. So Musekese Camp and the conservation project, we're also a smart site, and smart is a tool developed by Panthera, who we work closely with in the Kafui. And it's an acronym for Spatial Monitoring and Reporting Tool. And many guests who might be listening this evening will have seen us use these in the field, and the scouts use them as well. And they go out on every patrol or game drive. They record the routes, distances, observations from any signs to direct sightings of wildlife, but also, of course, illegal activities and so on. And it's a really good tool for identifying patterns, trends. And when we put these together and create maps and information from it, it really does assist in the patrol planning phase, which does need to be pinpoint and accurate. So the data, it's also useful for the research team, who will use it to supplement their own collections. So don't if you see us out guiding with what looks like a cell phone, don't be. Well, we may even give it to you to do the work for us, but especially if it's scat collection. Things like the law enforcement and the research are all well and good, but it's extremely difficult with what is a really limited infrastructure. And so we've made a big commitment to enhancing the road and firebrake network of the region, and we recently got a tractor in our fleet, and together with a rotary mower and disc harrow. And that gives us the ability to cut new tracks and to repair and maintain existing ones. But more importantly, perhaps, is the ability to create and maintain extensive fire breaks. And we've seen firsthand how fire prevention can benefit an area. And each year we've tried to increase the network of fire breaks. And I think last year we were effective in protecting about 24,000 hectares of bush from the seasonal bushfires. We converted an old game viewer into a firefighting truck. You can see this old Land Rover here. Lots of you will be pleased to see a Land Rover in a workshop, I'm sure. But we did fit it with a 1,000-litre Bowser and a high-pressure pump and hose, which for fighting fires it's amazing, and such a cool tool. But we're torn between leaving it green as it was a game viewer, or painting it red like a fire engine. So if anyone has any preferences, perhaps we'll have a vote at the end of the evening. But all these efforts take a great deal of time and planning and management. And so, the anti-poaching teams wouldn't be able to function without the support. And so we took the step of recruiting a project coordinator and project manager and a deputy. And in the normal course of events, it might be hard to support these necessary or vital human resources, but thankfully, from a tourism perspective, we're myself and Tyrone, who are we're volunteers essentially, but through Musekese Camp, we're able to supplement quite a few of these positions and expenses. So that really does play a part, and where tourism comes in. So with all this effort, where do we sit in terms of results? Well, we decided from the very beginning that we'd measure the success of these interventions and efforts through an increase in wildlife populations. And it's that's in theory quite simple. But that being said, because we're in our relative infancy and there's little to no baseline data to work with or reference, we can't say definitively what effects we've had. But what we can say is that in the core areas, wildlife has really seemed to flourish over the last 18 months. Back to near on 100% recruitment rates with the lion prides, together with the healthy male-female ratio. We've had the wild dogs denning. They formed a new pack. All the elephant breeding herds are just totally relaxed and increasingly so. And, they also have lots of calves amongst them. Also seeing increasing signs of larger ungulates like buffalo and eland starting to return in some areas. In addition to that, recoveries of poaching camps and snares have drastically reduced, and it's been a long time since we saw, we did see a snared hyena last year on a camera trap, but apart from that, it's been a very long time, and patrol teams are regularly recording no signs of poaching. From an employment perspective, we've employed and empowered almost 40 people from the adjacent communities, and that certainly doesn't relate to tourism-related staff. You can see some of these just very basic graphs for display this evening, but the trends is generally a downward trend in recoveries and observations of illegal activity from year to year, and this is this is encouraging. So together with an increase in wildlife, this really is where we want to be. And a few stats and figures here. These are a month or two out of date, but you can see the work that the teams are putting in, getting, stopping illegal activities, good recoveries. So yeah, all in all, seems to be heading in the right direction. But again, this is a brief snapshot and the results of a continued effort and presence. But I will say there is a caveat to that. And because of limited resources, we're only really effective over about a third of the entire area. And whilst patrol teams do conduct patrols across the whole area, it's not possible to maintain a sustained presence throughout. And so there'll be inevitably some gaps and exceptions. Here you've got a map showing all areas that are further than 4 kilometers from a road, and this is the yellow is our patrol coverage throughout the year. So the IUCN recommends to have about 1 ranger per 50 square kilometers for effective conservation of protected areas, and in this specific area would suggest we need between 50 and 60 boots on the ground. And looking at what we do and cover, it's probably an accurate reflection of that figure. We try and make them more effective through the use of the tools and the technology at our disposal, but there really is no escaping the need for more scouts or rangers. And so whilst addressing that challenge, we must also work around the limited infrastructure. And as I say, the majority of the landscape has got no easy access by road or any other means. And especially during the rainy season, it's many of these places are completely impassable. So yeah, it's a big challenge. So what next? Sorry, let me just reference this map here. You've got the river here running from this northeast corner. And if you look at all these patrol tracks here, there's still enormous gaps. And bearing in mind that many of these tracks are once-off excursions, what we can do with a lot of the data we collect is create heat maps. And those are perhaps a more accurate reflection of the time spent in an area. But essentially, there's still ground to cover to make our effective to make our efforts more effective. So I'm aware of time sort of starting to tick. So I'll just go through quickly what so what next? Well, we've looked extensively at the landscape and how we can best manage our limited resources, and we've put together a master plan that will not only enable us to cover more territory and be more effective, but what will also encourage, hopefully, further investment in tourism and linkages between areas in the park. And this really boils down to being strategic with the infrastructure that we develop. Things like access and management roads, boreholes and water points, and pickets for anti-poaching teams. We've also identified a strategic location for a second anti-poaching base, and we've applied for funding to do that. So hopefully we'll know more about that in the not too distant future. But essentially that will treble the coverage of the area and hopefully encourage more investment in the tourism sector. Of course, all very much dependent on funding and the resumption of tourism. But in the meantime, we'll just continue to perspire and work with the department. Training is a really important part, keeping scouts safe, giving them the necessary skills, whether it's advanced first aid training to crime scene management. Human rights training is an important component of what we have to do. But in addition to that, we're also eager to deploy more satellite tracking collars on key species, especially ungulates. And this will really enable anti-poaching teams to respond to erratic or suspicious movements, or if we can see that an individual is moving into an area where we know the threat level is perhaps significantly higher. And this sort of halo effect method has been successful in protecting the large carnivores in the area from snaring and other real threats. But we'd like to extend those efforts to other species such as elephant and buffalo, and whose seasonal movements we really don't understand yet. And this type of information will allow the teams to be deployed more strategically and effectively and in good time. But of course, I will say that the ultimate goal is to provide suitable protection across the area, that there'd be no need for collaring wildlife at all. And if we get there, or when we get there, should I say, that's when we can start looking at the reintroduction of rhino, hopefully. A big question that I'm sure you all have is how we've funded this, and it's a good question. Of course, we worked incredibly hard to secure the backing of donors, but prior to this and throughout their support, we did rely predominantly on tourism. Of course, COVID has made some significant impacts on that. But initially, the conservation efforts were funded by us entirely through the profits of Jeffrey and McKeith Safaris and our sister company, Real Nature, and as well as through our fundraising events, bed night contributions and donations here and there from guests. But as we began to integrate tourism more and more, the donations became more frequent, to a point where roughly 70% of our annual operating costs were funded entirely by tourism, which at the time was a little over $130,000 a year. So as we built capacity and achieved certain things, it was really necessary to grow the project, and we began applying for more grants. As I said, we eventually made the decision to recruit a project coordinator to assist with the grant writing and reporting, and that's helped to increase our operations now and operate on an annual budget about 3 times of that amount. As you've seen, supporting 4 anti-poaching teams, aircraft, vehicles, boats, and so on, and has allowed us to ride out the storm of COVID, where funding from tourism just basically came to an end overnight. And it's also a period where we all anticipated a major increase in poaching. So whilst the pandemic has been a major obstacle, it forced us to become a bit more resourceful and resilient, and with the ongoing trust of the donor community, hopefully we'll have a pretty well-balanced project on the other side of it. And hopefully with that support from tourism on the rebound from COVID-19, our business model it really is committed to continuing this support to conservation as much as possible. And we'll continue to volunteer our time and resources, covering salaries where we can, donating equipment or vehicles. And another thing we've done is we've increased the percentage of our rates that will go towards conservation. I put this slide up here as I wanted to give you an idea into what a normal day at the APU might look like. But I'm aware of running out of time here today. But let me run through this quickly, just so that you have an idea of the scope of work that goes on a daily basis. So a day might start with a patrol team beginning a patrol cycle. They need to be briefed with a DMPW commander, a project manager. This should be done in the briefing room. And I've tried to include photos here of the different components that the management team would need to deal with on a daily basis. But, patrol planning done with detailed maps and reports from previous patrols, up-to-date information from the monitoring systems, relying on information from intelligence units. Of course, the patrol team, before heading out, they need to draw their patrol equipment and supplies from the stores whilst vehicles and boats are prepared for deployment. Teams, of course, need to go out with fully charged communication, tracking and navigation devices, survival gear, rations. And then if we've got an incoming team, they'll need to be debriefed by the commanding officer or the debrief officer, just whilst the patrol is fresh in their minds. In the background, of course, people working hard to compile reports, submit applications, or attend stakeholder meetings. Research team could be in the field, collecting data, information, responding to reports of injured wildlife. Of course, we've got to look after the base staff, making sure they're well looked after. Facilities are clean. Any preparations are done for visitors that might come. You've got the fire breaks going on in the background, especially early season. Of course, and then the workshop, busy 24/7. Got to make sure the vehicles and boats are in good shape, because they do work pretty well over time and off-road on bumpy, muddy, rocky terrain. So it takes a great deal of coordination and oversight. But importantly, it also requires a great deal of working together with cooperating partners. And so I'll just quickly go on to share them with you. But of course, our principal partner will always be the Department of National Parks and Wildlife, together with the community resource boards. But under their umbrella, we continue to work closely with Wildlife Crime Prevention and Panthera, the Zambian Carnival Program, and Game Rangers International. Of course, outside of the Kafui, we've been grateful for the support of organizations such as Frankfurt Zoological Society or Conservation Lower Zambezi. And they've all been so kind to us in advising where, and sharing their experiences and allowing our team to visit from time to time and continue the learning process. But before I close out the slideshow and an opportunity to take questions, just wanted to briefly reflect on the importance of tourism and how this journey has really created a blueprint for conservation in Zambia or Africa, if you like. And of course, there are many conservation organizations around the world, but it's increasingly rare to find new conservation organizations. And I suppose in part this is due to limited availability of resources, and it can be to some degree politically charged, and it's difficult to establish a project in a space where similar projects exist. And I truly sympathize with that, because if you're reliant on donor funding and only really, then the perceptions are that you could dilute the funding available or even threaten funding streams. Excuse me. And if you're essentially competing for the same donors. So we recognize this from an early stage and before we even got going, and we made sure that this was all communicated openly with those who are already engaged in conservation work and in and around the Kafui. We made sure that our objectives were clear and that we had no intention of duplicating anything or taking anything away from the work that others were doing. We simply wanted to make resources available where they weren't and fill the gaps that needed filling. Remember, this is a landscape bigger than some countries. But importantly, however, in the present day and the times that we live, it was really necessary to demonstrate a level of sustainability and self-reliance beyond the donors, because and tourism has been just that. Of course, COVID is a spanner in the works, but I suppose without tourism, where would we be? And I guess the crux of today's talk is I suppose how would someone else go about this? And I really feel that our biggest achievement, I believe, is in changing the perception of tourism in the eyes of the powers that be, if you like. where in the past camps and lodges have occupied a very different space to NGOs, and while support is generally forthcoming from camps and lodges, we for too long have sat at different tables. The notion of camps and lodges having no place in doing conservation work, we feel is pretty outdated. We're certainly not mutually exclusive. And whilst we certainly can't take credit for it all, we've played a big part in paving the way for others to follow. And as a result, and this is really important, now sitting in the hands of the park wardens and the managers is a handbook. And in that handbook, it describes exactly what needs to be done to support conservation in the park and how to do it, whether you are an investor, a lodge operator, or an NGO. And whilst it's still being developed together with partners, we really feel that the hard work has been done. And more important than the contents of the handbook is perhaps the endorsement from the authorities that this implies, and the belief and trust that has been built to pave the way for private sector involvement in the conservation of Africa's rich natural heritage. It is possible if you have the right motivations. There really is nothing stopping you from playing your part. And if it can be done through tourism in the way we have done, then all the better for the additional jobs and the revenue it provides. And I guess in the same way that conservation has kept the parks going in the absence of tourism, imagine the tables were turned and donor funding disappeared. What really would we do without tourism? And it speaks to the notion that nothing is impossible, and we hope that our efforts will be useful to those that might follow. But for now, we're not done, and these are truly exciting moments in a time for a park that we love so very much and believe in. And we hope that once this pandemic is behind us, we'll be able to share it with you all. So I'm going to finish there with thank you very much for your time. I'm aware that I've spoken for quite a while, so I shall end there, and hopefully Tyrone and myself and Beanie, if she's still online, can answer some of your questions.
Thank you. This is a very serious question because I have been wanting to do that. I've had this at the back of my mind that this is a path that I want to follow also after I finish editing a film I'm working on. Do you have like a step-by-step model, or does anyone have, or is there one that you followed to make it easier for one person or groups of people who want to do what you're doing?
Yes, sorry. How's the process work, Chris? Am I able to answer that? Can I?
Yeah, please carry on. No, all over to you. With this, we're free to speak here.
Lorraine, thank you for a really good question. I'll try and be prompt with my answers to allow everyone else to ask questions too. But as I said at the end of the talk there, what we've helped to develop over the last couple of years is a handbook, and genuinely that's what it is. It's a physical document that sits in the desk of the park wardens, and should someone as wonderful as yourself come along and say, "Cool, this is what I want to do. I want to play my bit." They'll take out that document, and in there should have everything that you need. So we feel very proud to have been part of developing that, and I think it's fantastic that you have similar desires. I think that's great.
Thanks for that inspiring talk. It's quite envious of what you guys are doing there, and I'd love to come there, but I pretty much say that to everybody who talks here, so I better not say that too much. But I was just interested, having a river literally across the one whole side of the park, how much poaching comes via boats from the river, and how easy is it to patrol that? Because I mean, you showed us all the routes of where the rangers are walking, etc. And in a way, I'm amazed at the amount of poaching that you mentioned, considering you're almost landlocked within other areas of the greater Kafue National Park. I would have thought that they would poach close by to the edge as opposed to come all the way into your area. But is the river a big issue or problem for poaching? How do you control that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Marty, and certainly in the Musekese area, because on the other side of the river you've got vast area of the park. We're very fortunate that there are other partners working in those areas, so that particular river isn't a threat for us. It's the Kafue River it's wide in some places, a few hundred meters wide and very deep. So it is difficult for people to cross. They remember they're walking for many miles with so they can't carry boats. We have seen instances where they use tree bark to float across, but it's very rare. And so the river for us is a significant boundary. Some of the smaller tributaries in the Lefupa and Lunga rivers are more easily crossed, but the main river is a significant barrier.
So I'm really interested in that whole area. I'm actually going to Zambia in the beginning of May, and our plans aren't really firmed up, but I'm going with people that are very into conservation and particularly into ecotourism. Is there any way we can arrange to come and spend a couple of days with you guys? We're South Africans on South African rand, so I know Zambia is not cheap, but anything that we would love to just see the project and see what you guys are up to. It's always very inspiring when someone goes and creates something that has such an incredible protection impact.
Yeah, no, thanks for your interest, Justine, and thanks for listening. One of the things I unfortunately had to skip a few sections because I was very aware of time and giving people opportunities to speak and ask us questions. But one of the bits I skipped is we're busy. One of the things we do on a daily basis is we integrate the guest visits into the conservation side of things. So, the anti-poaching bay is about an hour and a half from our main camp. So it's a bit of a way, but we're busy building a visitor center where we have displays and information. And, so what we generally do is take a day trip down there, interact with the scouts if they're on base, have a packed lunch on the river in the rapids. It's a beautiful sight as it is. But that's a really enjoyable day, if you like. From a volunteer perspective, we haven't got a volunteer program, but it's something that in the future we will look to develop. Yeah.
Okay. And what about visiting you guys in general? Are you open right now? Because I know COVID's made a lot of people shut down operations. Are you still running?
Kafue, Zambia is very seasonal, so we'll open in June and run through to the end of November.
Philip, I'm really deeply impressed, and I felt every word you said. You are so much a member of a club of fighters for decades on this continent, and actually I'm wondering, there's quite a number of people I can put you in touch with because, I'm also a conservationist of a private park, and we have quite a number of people who are running such projects like yours in areas which they either own or concessions. Concessions in Kenya, there's community conservancies, the Kotas and others who have the similar challenge, and it just helps if you are in touch with them, how they solve the problem, how they can organize political support, how they can get donors, and of course, security of tenure of the control of the area is a factor. So there's so much networking I could offer you, and you might have it already. So I'm not kind of pretending that you might not have these contacts, but Kenya, Tanzania, there are people who can really help you with advice and contacts. And my park, I got it funded for 2 years now, partly crowdfunding, partly GTZ for Corona emergency funding. And there's Biopama from IUCN, which are also keeping parks running. So same as writing applications and making the case very strongly. And it just helps if you get in touch with other people who work under very similar conditions as you do. So what I can offer is to put you in touch with some people who are doing exactly what you're doing in neighboring countries and may have some good ideas on how to consolidate what you're doing and to make it more sustainable. And I mean, last but not least, I'm wondering, does Zambia have a legislation that would allow you to take a concession on the area, so you have a more long-term perspective and more legal rights to control, which of course would also sometimes make it easier for more long-term involvement of private sector funding and donors. Yeah, so yeah, I have no idea. I don't know Zambia, so that's maybe something.
It's a good question, but firstly, thank you for your kind offer, Sybil, and we'll be in touch. I appreciate that so much. Every bit helps, I must say. But from a tenureship in Zambia, you don't have, because the whole of the Musekese Camp area is inside the Kafue National Park, and so in Zambia you don't get private concessions inside national parks. It's all under government land and administered by the Department of National Parks and Wildlife. But we have worked very hard to establish a very strong relationship with the park authorities, and that extends to African parks. I know there may be questions some people would like to ask, but to cut a long story short, Sybil, we rely on the strength of our good relationship with the park authorities for posterity, basically. Yeah.
Thanks for a great chat, a great presentation, Philip, and amazing work that you're doing there. Just wanted to ask, the boundary on your site looks like it's a road. I'm not sure how busy that is, but I know Zambia is working on these connections, and that's not always a great thing. How busy is that road, and from a sort of monitoring perspective, how has it impacted, or how does it impact on your anti-poaching there?
Hi, Robin. Thanks for joining us this evening, and thanks for the question. A good question. That road is the M9, and it's the main road that connects Western Zambia, so Mongu, Kalabo, Barotsi land to Lusaka. So it's a main trunk road. It's single lane, as in each side, but it was rebuilt in 2004, 2005. So it's in good condition, which is great for access, but it does mean that vehicles, buses, trucks, and so on speed through the park at night and at all times. It used to close 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., but they wouldn't do that anymore. As I said, it's a main trunk road. We do know that it's used for pickup points for contraband, jumping in vehicles or trucks. We know that the GMA side, where there are communities, there are trails that they use to come in and out. So we do try and monitor those. But beyond all that as well is the direct impact, road kills, especially large carnivores. In the rainy season, the road tends to be the highest, the driest, and the warmest place. So at night for the large carnivores, it's a death trap. Yeah.
We were, as I mentioned, we were just through Kafue just over a year ago, and one thing that was very noticeable to us was how skittish the elephant were. And I assume that's from poaching. I mean, more so than any of the other parks we've ever visited. And I wonder, do you notice any change in animal behavior as poaching has gotten, as you've had the success, or does that take many, many years before you start to see an impact there?
A good question, Brad. Elephants are smart animals. They are incredibly, gosh, I don't want to be too I don't want to romanticize them too much, but they are just incredible animals and intelligent as anything. And so they know where they're safe. And we enjoy tremendous interaction with breeding herds, with lone bulls, with females with calves. Chris and Vicky, who were on the talk, may still be there. We had a morning where, at one point I was sort of sat under a trunk of a cow with a calf. It's not exactly the best place to be, but my point is that you can have these interactions and experiences in an area that is well protected. And it's unfortunate that you have those experiences, but it is a reflection of poaching or pressures of some sort or another. And the only thing I can say is, you know, Tyrone and myself will always fight Kafui's corner and say that, you know, it's an enormous park. And if you go into the core well-protected areas, you'll have some fantastic encounters with elephants and other wildlife. Equally, you go to other protected areas, you'll have the same thing. But if you stay in that core area, you'll experience the relaxed herds and so on. But if you go out into the back country of some of the other national parks, you'll get the same reaction.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that there's a comment about 1% of the visitors that Kruger gets, and that there's just nobody there. You know, you could drive for a long time before you run into people there. It's wonderful. So
exactly. Well, we hope you'll make it back to Kafue.
Yeah.